Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and to everyone who's joined us. Welcome to our virtual event, Finding a Job During Difficult Times. I'm so excited for this program, and I hope that it can be very helpful to all of you in attendance. And first, just congratulations to anyone who has graduated. That's such a huge accomplishment. And great job on persevering through these unprecedented times. None of us anticipated this would be happening this year, but you stayed the course. So great job to you. I am so excited by who we are with today, both Kristen Pitchler and Lucy, who I will let introduce themselves in a moment. But they both have just a wealth of knowledge that I think is going to really help all of you and really set all of you up for success as you try to navigate how to get a job in these kind of uncertain times that we're in. First, let me say, who am I? If you don't know who I am Randy Sorensen. I'm the Training and Development Specialist at the University Student Union, and I have the pleasure of working under my boss, who's Kristen Pitchler. KP, did you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, I'm happy to. For those of you who may not know me, I am Kristen Pitchler. Most people know me by my initials, KP. I am honored and privileged to be the Associate Director of Human Resources and Professional Development for the University Student Union. I've been in my role for probably 20 years or so, and I've worked for the USU for quite a few years longer than that. My career passion is human resources, and certainly career development is an offshoot of that I just love. So I'm very, very happy to be with all of you today.
Thank you, KP. And I wanted to also kick it over to our other presenter today, Lucy. Lucy, did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. My name is Lucy Massis, and I am a career counselor from our CSUN Career Center. I've also had an opportunity, I did recognize some of the names, so it's glad to see that you're here. Again, extending my congratulations to everyone as well who's graduated. And I do a lot of work in the Career Center with employment, with employers, with students finding jobs. I'm working on how to find a job on campus, but then a lot of our work is getting people career ready for that transition into the world of work. So I'm happy to be here to have this conversation with all of you.
Well, thank you both for introducing yourselves. So just to give everyone a quick rundown of the format today, we want to make this as collaborative as possible. So if you've got questions, please put them in the chat box, but also feel free to just raise your hand and we can answer them for you. The more collaborative this is, the more fun it's going to be. And if you've got a question, most people probably have the same question and are looking for the same answer. So be sure to ask it. And then what we'll do is we'll go through just several different topics of how we can support you and provide support to you. The first thing that we'll do, though, is we're going to show a quick video that really kind of touches on the topic that we are going to be diving into today. So if everyone can just take a quick look at the video we're about to show, and then we will move forward from there.
But we're committed to helping people get back on their feet through our ABC7 Solutions Hiring SoCal campaign.
For graduating seniors, it is a very uncertain job market right now, which may require a different approach to how they look for work. Dr. Rick Moore is a professor of management at Cal State University Northridge, and he is joining us now to discuss this. Thank you so much, Dr. Moore, for joining us. Your work has involved developing an innovative method. It measures student success, including tracking employment and earnings. So what have you learned that may help today's graduates?
Well, what we've learned is that the period coming up here is going to be very difficult for new graduates to get on their feet. But the other answer to that question is that in the long run, the future is bright for people with a college degree. The Public Policy Institute of California estimates that California is going to be short about 1 million college graduates over the next couple decades because the economy will continue to grow in the long run, and the baby boomers like myself will one day retire, and that's going to create a lot of openings for people with a college degree. But in the interim, you're going to have to do some hustling to be successful.
Well, that's encouraging. A lot of the hustling involves networking, but in today's day and age, it doesn't seem to be likely. How does it look different now than it did a year ago?
Well, a year ago, of course, there was a lot of demand for college graduates, and incomes were rising, and it was a very good time. Now it's a more difficult time. It's more like it was in 08 and 09 when people were graduating from college, and we learned some things from that. And the first thing we learned is that you've got to stay in the game. If you have a part-time job, keep it. If you can't find a full-time job, but you can find a part-time job, take the part-time job. If you need to take an internship, some large companies are doing virtual internships, do that. If you can find a way to volunteer in a way that's related to your job, like if you're interested in politics or government, you can volunteer on a campaign. Do that. But the worst thing you can do in this environment is nothing.
Absolutely. That's good advice.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of parents of graduates right now are going, oh, goodness, boomeranged. I know, I'm thinking right there. So
I've had a few in my house. Yeah.
It's our new normal, as I'm sure your graduating seniors are talking about. So, but what is your advice for, you're talking about kids staying home, getting out there and even doing anything, even if it's not making a lot of money. But what do you think might be getting them meaningful work? And how can they get that right now?
Well, the same rules sort of apply in this environment as in the regular environment. First thing is you've got to have a goal and a strategy. So what kind of job do you want? What kind of industry do you want to work in? Where do you want to live? You still have to have a goal in mind. Once you have a goal in mind, then you've got to focus a lot on networking. So you can do a lot of that virtually. You can make sure your LinkedIn page is buffed up and telling the story you want it to tell. You can stay in touch with the Career Center on your campus to see what opportunities are coming up. And again, the opportunity to volunteer is often a great way to network. For example, I teach people who are interested in human resource management. There's a professional association called the Society of Human Resource Managers, and anyone can join their local chapter and get involved and volunteer and meet a lot of human resource managers who might be a pathway to a job in the near or the long run. And the last thing is keep building your skills. You can enroll for very little cost in a community college course. You can take online courses, but you want to be ready when the opportunity comes. So you need to keep building your skills.
All right. Well, Dr. Richard Moore, Professor of Management at Cal State University Northridge, we appreciate your time and stay healthy. Thank you.
Good luck to all the graduates.
Hi.
Okay, so that I feel like is an incredibly relatable video. I'm sure many of you can relate to it as well. And we're going to keep that in the back of our minds as we move forward into the next portion of this workshop. So I know some of you have submitted questions in advance, so we're going to go through and answer some of those. And let them guide us as prompts. But what I want to do first is I want to move into, how exactly does one prepare to find a job during difficult times? And I want to talk with you, Lucy, a little bit first about this.
Yes.
And, how does one exactly prepare to find a job in a difficult time like this? And I know we have a wealth of resources available on campus, and especially in the Career Center. And a great place maybe to start would be to just talk about one of the great places to find a lot of resources, which is Careerlink and Handshake. Did you want to start off there, or
You know
I'll over to you.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, so I, want to just kind of start by saying that, job search is always a tough thing, regardless. I think, there's different challenges. So there's some things that still are the same, and then there's going to be some things that it's like we have to be a little bit more creative with. So one thing that we've always had are these resources, and a lot of times students don't know about them. So thank you for highlighting our Career Center. We do have, if you haven't been on our website before, I do want to say, go to our Career Center website. I will tell you it if you want to put it in the chat. It's www.csun.edu/career. And that will take you to your Career Center homepage, and you'll be able to see that there is lots of resources on there. Right now we're virtual, so there's a lot of opportunities for you to get connected with the Career Center virtually. You mentioned the two kind of our signature programs that we call them. We got Careerlink, and Careerlink is an online database that allows you to have lots of resources from everything from exploration. So if you're kind of like, what am I gonna do? There's a lot of components in there that can help you kind of get connected to different resources. I always like to say, you could go to Google, right? Our search engines, and we can put in there and say, what can I do with my major? What can I do? Where are they hiring? And you'll get a plethora of stuff. And some of it you're like, I don't know about this. And some of it you'll be like, oh, well, the nice thing about Careerlink is that we've filtered it to really bring you the valuable resources that the career counselors in the Career Center have found to be helpful to kind of give you a starting place, right? So in there's also one button in particular that I want to tell you all, go find it. And that area is job search. And it's going to give you really the tips from everything from resumes, cover letters, links out. And we actually have added another button recently about COVID. We're all going through this tough time, and there's additional resources in there about taking care of yourself during this time, as well as that, where are they hiring right now? Because it does look different than when I was looking for a job a year ago, kind of thing. So that is Careerlink. You'll see it in there, as well as Handshake. Handshake is our online job board that actually is connected to tons of employers that are posting. They're looking for you. They're going to post in Handshake. And, there's local jobs, but there's also jobs that may be out of the area. So depending where you're looking for, you're going to want to go ahead and check out Handshake. That's also where we're going to post our virtual events. We had a job fair yesterday, and I just heard we had 1,000 students show up based on our data. So amazing. We had a great opportunity for students and employers to get connected virtually. So it's possible, I think, which is just most importantly, know those resources. And I just really wanted to highlight those two. So thank you, Randy, for giving us an opportunity to talk about how they can use those to help them. Okay.
Of course, and 1,000 participants is awesome. It just shows how many people are looking and hoping to find a job out there. So I'm glad we have that available for them.
Yes, it's been wonderful that we were able to do that.
Awesome. So let's move into a couple questions. And KP, please feel free to chime in when you see fit as well. And anyone, just a reminder, if you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box or raise your hand and we can answer them for you. So Lucy, how can one really be most successful in this new hiring environment? I know we talked a little bit about that. I know we saw a little bit in the video, and I know that's a really broad question, but what would you say, how could someone really be successful in this new place that we're in?
Right, and I really wanted to just highlight a few things, and I know they mentioned in the video, like you said, but research. You're at home, you've got the internet, hopefully, or resources at your fingertips, at least virtually right now, that you need to be diligent with your research, I think is one of the important pieces. I feel like maybe even in the past, it was like word of mouth, or you'd hear from somebody, or in passing, you'd find out. Now it's really about kind of getting ahead through your research, I think is a big piece. In addition to that, I know the video emphasized networking. I don't think I could emphasize enough the importance of networking, and I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about the how-to in a little bit, but I think networking is a big piece, and how you're making those connections and maintaining those connections, I think is really important. And another thing I wanted to just really highlight about during this time is being open to different possibilities, kind of being aware that your maybe plan A that you had 6 months ago might look a little different right now. So being that that's the case, approaching it differently as well. I don't know what I wanted to leave you all with. KP, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, one of the things, one of the quotes that I sort of live life by is that you play the way you practice. So I think that what that means in this situation is that this opportunity gives you time to practice in ways that you might not have had before. So being able to really anticipate what interview questions you might be asked, and not just, cultivate answers that are based on the questions you like, but make a list of the 5 questions you hope you aren't asked, and then cultivate really, really good answers to those. I think is one strategy that's really, really important. Being prepared that because of the exorbitantly high unemployment rate, there are going to be employers that are still looking, but they may not have the ability to do in-person interviews. So one of the things that employers are looking to use is artificial intelligence to generate some standard interview questions, and then have you do a video where you will answer those. And they are kind of keen on that right now because it eliminates the bias that is often associated with interview committees. So being able to practice those and seeing yourself on video and seeing how you look, how you answer questions, and then tweaking that is really, really important. So use the time wisely. I just think that there are a lot of things that you can do now that are going to position you in ways that maybe other candidates aren't thinking about.
Thank you both. Those are such great and helpful responses. And I know so much about, when you're trying to find that job, so much of it comes out to, or down to how do you market yourself. Mm-hmm. Makes me wonder about this next question is, what would you both say is the kind of the #1 personality trait that you would look for in a potential member of your team?
I think for myself, it's kind of 2. Sorry, I'm going to go with 2. But one of them being adaptability. I think that's so big because regardless what field you're in, I think adaptability with things as we're experiencing even right now, showing that you're able to adjust when maybe the course changes a little bit. I think that's important. My second one would be being a person who takes initiative, I think is a big one as well. As a supervisor, I'm often looking to have people who I'm taking on who are able to demonstrate that they're able to take initiative within, parameters or reason or within their field as appropriately as possible. So those are my 2 that I think I look for the most.
I would say, one of the things that always comes across in an interview in a positive way is someone's attitude, their optimism, and their passion. When you are hiring somebody to work for your organization, you want to know that they're going to be a good fit, because oftentimes you're going to spend more time with them than you do with your own family. So to be working with somebody who's going to inspire you and the other members of the team with their attitude, who's going to be passionate about the work that they do, who is going to have kind of the can-do as opposed to can't-do attitude, I think is really, really significant, and it's a starting place. One of the things that we often say, particularly when we're hiring entry-level professionals, is that we can train for skill, but we can't train for character. So we're looking for people who really have the ability to demonstrate through their interview that they have those qualities that I mentioned, but are also self-reflective, they're honest, they're accountable, and are willing to learn and grow. That's just something we can't teach. And so those are great skills to be able to demonstrate.
Really good stuff there. I definitely agree with that. So as folks are preparing for their job search, and they're going to start applying for a lot of different positions that they see as they become available, another question for you, is it appropriate, or would you say it's appropriate to apply for jobs even though you may not meet all of the requirements for them, such as maybe you don't have all of the years of experience that a job description is asking for? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know, KP, you might have more experience within the HR area. I'll give my 2 cents, though. I feel like it depends on the job description. If it says like must have, and it's more of a technical piece, like must have a degree in something, that's sometimes where it might be a little bit more challenging to go around. But when it's other requirements that you can maybe obtain or learn as it goes, or you might not have quite the full amount, I would say, you know what, you might want to still apply for that position. So I think it's kind of, you have to be strategic about it, but I wouldn't say like don't apply just because maybe there's a portion on there that you're feeling like, oh, well, maybe I don't quite have that, because you may still be able to get through because you don't know who you're applying with, you know, what are the other people coming with? So I know KP's probably seen this in her field more. So do you want to?
Sure. So I think it depends on how the job posting reads. So if a job posting reads 2 years of professional experience required, know that that application is likely to be weeded out unless you very clearly demonstrate that you have those 2 years of professional experience. But professional experience can be quantified in a whole lot of ways. So one of the things that I encourage people to do on a resume is when they are looking at a job posting, and you've got to know that job description inside and out, because everything that you're going to do in your resume, in your cover letter, in your interview is going to be tailored to demonstrating how you meet the qualifications for that job. But one of the things that you have the ability to do is cite relevant experience. The relevant experience might have been leadership experience that you obtained in a different way than through a professional experience. So maybe you are an event planner and you have coordinated weddings for 5 of your friends. I'm just going to say that hypothetically. That is professional experience that you need to think about how you want to put on your resume, because that again is something that's unique and special and that could qualify you and then gives you at least that foot in the door to be able to hopefully articulate that differently in an interview.
So helpful. We actually, as you all were speaking, we got a couple of questions that came in that relate to this a little bit, but are a little bit different. We can go ahead and look at some of those now. Lonnie has asked, if you're applying for positions and the person who has the authority to select who to hire is someone you already work for or already know, is it acceptable to discuss the job posting with them before deciding whether to apply? Do either of you want to chime in on that?
So let me start, and then Lucy, if you have something to add, please do.
Sure.
Lonnie, we're glad that you're on the call this morning. So my answer would be a very HR answer, and I think that depends. I think that you could certainly ask it just the way that you have in the chat. Is it acceptable? Do you have the ability to talk to me about the job posting? And then your supervisor, or the person that you're working with, has the ability to either say, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. What do you want to ask? Or no, I think this would be a conflict of interest because it would violate equal opportunity, some equal opportunity stuff, because I'm not going to be doing this with the other candidates. So I would rather not. But asking the question is probably the first step in the process. And then just being, respectful of whatever the answer is.
Yes. I think I would just add to it too, because maybe by asking, there may be stuff that they can discuss, and then there may be stuff they can't discuss. So, that would be a line that they will navigate. And I think just asking gives you the opportunity to, it's okay if they say no, and they might say, you know what, I can't, but you know what, if you're really interested, first of all, you're showing that you're interested. So that's a good sign. And then maybe they'll say no, but you know what, you should talk to this person. Maybe they had the position before, so they can answer you questions about the position. So those kind of things. So it kind of just even opens doors for you as you move forward. So yeah, great question.
Lucy and KP, appreciate you answering.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lonnie. Such a good question. So I know one of the biggest pieces when it comes to looking for a job is networking. And networking is going to look a bit different in our new environment. So can we talk a little bit about the importance of networking? I know LinkedIn might be a new great option for networking when it comes to how we do this in this new environment. Can we talk a little bit about that for a second?
Sure. So yes, networking, I know we're already throwing that out there. As far as, networking, I feel like also I wanted to just kind of put it out there. It could be easier for some people and more challenging for others. Some people might be just more comfortable with networking. So it's like, oh, okay, network, let me just talk to people. And other people might say, oh, networking, what does that mean? What does that look like? So I know that I think KP and I can do a whole workshop just on networking. So I just want to, recognize that it could be a very challenging piece, but being in the environment we're in, I feel like it's also a very vital piece. And then kind of going into that idea of what it could look like, especially with LinkedIn. At the Career Center, we've really been trying to get students to realize that LinkedIn is something that you don't have to wait till you graduate. It's something that you could start doing, as early as freshman year, because it is a resource. It is a resource that's going to get you connected. It is a professional platform. So it might not be as fun as my Instagram, but it is going to be a place where I can see alum from CSUN. It's a place where I can see alum from the program that I graduated. It's a place where employers can see me. And I know they mentioned in the video about how and you mentioned also, Randy, about branding yourself as a way of marketing. That's going to be a place where you're going to be able to brand yourself. You're going to say, these are my experiences. These are the things I'm interested in accomplishing. And so it's a great place to get connected. I think just like anything, it could be intimidating if it's something new or something we're not familiar with. But there's great resources out there. Back to the Career Center website, we do have a lot of resources on Careerlink, and as well as we have our Instagram and our social media also post a lot of information about networking. So I definitely want to let people know that they can go there as well to kind of find out ways. But LinkedIn is definitely, right now especially, I think it's kind of gone up on the place. I feel like a lot of times we talk about networking and it's like, hey KP, let's have coffee and talk. And it's because it's still the relationship building, right? But maybe we can't do it in that fashion anymore. So I think it's extra important that we think of what are viable ways of networking. Is it just an email? Well, it could be through email. I know and I don't know if you mentioned it, but the importance of networking within your professors. You are all finishing school right now, and hopefully you've made great connections with some of your professors. And so keeping in mind that, you might want to continue those relationships. Don't wait 2 years, which I know you're all trying to find jobs now, but don't wait 2 years to contact that professor again. You know, maybe in a week or two after, you know, we're done, maybe say, you know what, I'm in the job searching like stage still. Like they don't know if you've gotten a great job or if you didn't. So if you're communicating with them and they hear of a job, they could sometimes be those networks as well. So hopefully that helps.
I think one of the things that often happens is that people are confused by the term networking. They think that that means sort of collecting a bunch of people that can lead them to jobs. But the truth of the matter is that the people in your network are the people that you have a relationship with, whether it be a close friendship, whether they be a family member, whether it be somebody who is just an acquaintance. And I think that it is important when thinking about networking to think about it in terms of how you would build a relationship with another. So what frequently happens to me, given my role in HR, is that I will encourage people to network with me. And then they come in and they have one meeting and we talk briefly. And of course, they're really nervous and I try to get to know them. And, you know, they're a little intimidated to ask me very many questions. And then the next meeting they come back and they say, I was wondering if I could use you as a reference. And the sad truth of the matter is that my answer is going to be no. Because I haven't had an opportunity to develop a relationship with you. I don't know who you are, and I cannot take a chance of putting my professional reputation on the line by vouching for somebody that I've had one interaction with. So one of the things that I always suggest to people is ask for a small favor or reach out and provide a small compliment. So let's say you have a professor that you would really like to include in your network. You might want to reach out to them and say, you know, now that the semester is over, I didn't want to miss the opportunity to thank you for your class. These were the things that I got out of it. This is what I learned and I will take with me. And I wonder if you would mind if I kept in touch with you on a regular basis. I know very few people who would say, nope, I don't want you to do that. And they might, because they might say, you know what, I'm moving out of the country or I'm taking on another responsibility and it's going to be more difficult for me to do that. But most of us who go into the field of higher ed do so because we love working with students. It then becomes incumbent upon you to ask maybe another question. Do you have a book that you read that was life-changing for you and that you would recommend to me, or a podcast that you listen to regularly? And see what they're able to offer up. And then pursue it. Read the book, listen to the podcast, and then your next interaction is going to be something like 3 weeks later, where you enthusiastically and optimistically reach out again and say, this was fantastic. Let me tell you what I learned from this. Thank you so much. Do you have something else? And you slowly, as you would with a friend, develop a relationship that is a back and forth relationship. You all know, I don't have to tell you, that we are all happy when people show an interest in us. And when they show an interest in us, then we show an interest in them. So that's really the way to start navigating networking from a relationship building standpoint. And I tell you that as somebody who is an introvert and who is shy by nature. So you who work with me do not recognize those traits at all because you see me as so outgoing. But the truth of the matter is my personality is more introverted. But I am good at knowing how to build relationships with other people because I've practiced it. And it's something that you can practice and cultivate as well.
Yes, and I just wanted to add, I thank you. I think how you described that was great. I want to add, even in that difference of how, you know, it might be more difficult for some or more easy, I think knowing that a network doesn't mean that you have to have 100 people. It might be 100 people, great. But it could be 3, it could be 5, so it doesn't have to be daunting of I need to make all these connections with tons of people. So just keep that in mind too. If you have 2 or 3 close connections, that could be your network.
Mhm.
I love both of those responses so much, and I know it works. I remember when I was a graduating student employee at the USC, one of the first things I did was I set up a meeting with KP, and we just kept on meeting. We just kept on talking, and then she became my mentor. Now she's my boss. So living proof
And we
that,
are friends. That's what's nice.
and one of my dearest friends. So living proof that this can work for you. Lonnie had another follow-up question with regard to networking in the chat box. I can read it real quick. So sometimes when I'm trying to network, if I hear of an event on campus, I'll ask them if they're attending it and maybe we can meet there. So it's casual. Does that work? Is that a good example of something that might work?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Great idea.
Okay, cool. I don't know if that's too, because I really like that idea you said about the book, having coffee maybe, and then, because I've had that experience too, where I've met up with somebody that I wanted to network with, and it was like a one-time thing. I was kind of nervous, and it didn't always like end up being more than just that one interaction. And it's hard, I think, to follow up, especially when time has passed. So I was wondering if maybe this would be something. This would be an easy thing for me, because if I'm already active on campus, I can be like, hey, are you going to be at the powwow or something like that.
Totally. And when you see somebody in a distance, one of the problems, I think one of my job hazards is that I've worked so long for the student union, and I've had so many, thousands and thousands of students I've known over the years, that I don't always remember people first off. So sometimes you have to come back and say, I know you probably don't remember me, but I'm Lonnie, this is where I work, and do it several times, because it will eventually click, and those are always conversation starters, So, kind of non-threatening, something that you can do, something that you can practice at, and then have a follow-up question after that. I think it just works really well. We have a colleague at work who is probably one of the friendliest people that I've ever met, who always leads with, how's your family? Very few people at work ask how your family is, but he has made a point of getting to know who my family members are, asks what they're doing, and then it becomes a reciprocal exchange, because I'm then able to do the same thing, and it creates a bond. So again, a networking opportunity that happens very informally, kind of like the way you're talking about, Lonnie. Good question.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to just add, I know Lonnie kind of said, like, sometimes you don't get to continue that relationship. Sometimes we lose touch, or things happen, life happens, and, we want to reconnect, but we don't know how. So I wanted to just encourage that. Don't feel like it's lost. Oh, I haven't talked to him in 2 years. Just don't make that phone call or that email be about a recommendation, but definitely reconnect and say, I know it's been a while, but I would love to hear what you're doing. I want to check in. I want to continue, like seeing how everything's going, and like reconnect, so it's okay to reconnect. So we're not saying like, if you lose connection, don't ever, like, yes, please reconnect. I get excited when I hear from people I haven't heard from and get to hear what they're up to. Oh, you finished grad school? Wow. Like, what's going on? So definitely look into your, list of people and think of that.
Great question, Lonnie, and great responses. I love how adaptable humans can be. We've just found a new way to network now, and this is how we're doing it. So I love it. Another quick question. I know we talked a bit about branding and how you market yourself. Question to both of you, do employers look into a candidate's personal life, say via their social media accounts? Do you all have any insight on that?
Well, I know they do, but yes, I feel like they can and they will. I think sometimes, we get, we get their information, their resume looks good. We want to know more. And sometimes people provide it, which is great if they provide their LinkedIn on the resume, but there's no, I don't think there's any reason why not, but they will look at it. And I've heard so many stories from employers of like, they'll go on there and be like, maybe something's not as appropriate and stuff. So that has, I know, played an impact in some people's, decisions. I know KP, I don't know if you've actually looked up people.
I would not want to admit that I've done that, but I think that you should expect that employers are going to do that. And particularly if it's just somebody, maybe they're on the fence about, or they're curious about. I just remember that when I, had young children, and I was trying to find a pediatrician for them, I found somebody I really, really liked, took my kids a couple of times, and then just got curious about the pediatrician and kind of looked her up online. And I found some stuff on social media that just did not sit well with me. And I don't know why she didn't take that down. I was really curious about that because it wasn't necessary, and it didn't necessarily dispute her qualifications. But I, as a mom of young kids, just wasn't comfortable with it and found somebody else. So it probably, is it to your benefit to scrutinize and scrub your social media? Just because the competition is going to be so stiff, and you want to make sure you position yourself to be in the best light to a future employer as you possibly can.
And I just wanted to tie it back to like the branding as well, of how, you're presenting yourself, and you want it to be consistent, so that when people are looking at these different aspects, you don't want it to be like, is that person the same person, or is this the person I'm reading about in here? So you don't want it to give them well, I don't know who am I going to get at the interview, or who am I going to get when I hire? So you want to have that consistency across how you're presenting yourself as well.
Such good points. And I think it's even more important now as we lean on technology even more in this time, as we're kind of forced to. And if you're at home, this is a great time to go through those social media accounts and do a quick little purge if you can, because this definitely does play a factor when you're looking for a job. So something definitely to keep in mind. So I want to switch gears a little bit here. I know as folks are preparing to look for a job, one of the big questions that folks have is often surrounding cover letters. Can we talk a little bit about the importance of just a cover letter? Let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times people, don't know, like, what do I put in a cover letter, or how to do a cover letter? But I always like to emphasize that it's really like a layer of who you are, in the sense of an opportunity to go a little bit deeper than the details that are in your resume, and really talk about you and connecting you to the position. So a little bit more than just saying, well, I have these qualifications, but I can bring this to your company. I can, really making that connection, so that you're not expecting them to make the connection from your resume. Your cover letter is an opportunity for you to help the potential employer see, oh, this is what Randy brings. This is why I would want to hire Randy, because I can now get it from your words. You don't want them to interpret and read in between the lines, because they might not read what you want them to read. You want them to read it in a cover letter. So I feel like a cover letter is super important. I always emphasize that.
I completely agree with Lucy. She and I have talked about this many times. I think, in recent years, there's been sort of some question about, is a cover letter really relevant? Do I really need to include a cover letter? And what I would say is that unless a company specifically says, do not include a cover letter, include a cover letter. That is your bridge between your resume, which is frankly typically kind of boring, and your the job announcement, and it's where you can show your personality, and it may allow you to talk about some things that there isn't a natural way to talk about in your resume. So some additional experience that maybe you didn't have, but that you want to highlight because it's particularly important for this job. So in many cases, maybe your resume is going to stay pretty much the same for every job you apply for, but your cover letter is what's going to change, and that you're going to want to wordsmith based on the research that you've done about the company, and then how your qualifications and your interest fits in particularly with that job that you're applying for. So like Lucy said, really, really important. I completely agree with her.
Thank you. Yes, I do feel like always include it. I agree. Thank you.
I just want to highlight that again. Unless a job application specifically says do not include a cover letter, make sure to include that cover letter. It's worth the time and energy you put into them. And to kind of follow up on cover letters a little bit, how would, when it comes to cover letters, how do you balance expression of personality and professionalism in a cover letter?
You know, I feel like it's really important to keep it real. I feel like a lot of times people need to keep in mind that it's still a professional document, right? And so keeping language professional, and so it's a little tough because sometimes we want to show our personalities and be fun, maybe throw in a joke, but we want to show that we're serious about the job as well. So keeping a balance, but still being true to yourself, and just really highlighting the details of your experiences, I think should be able to like talk a little bit more about your personality. So kind of showing like qualities maybe that you aren't able to express in a resume. So like a resume is very detailed, like I said, but maybe in your cover letter is an opportunity to say, you know what, I'm a team player, or I'm a, you know, I have these maybe soft skills that are not necessarily, you know, detailed in my resume, so that I get to show who I am. And I think I always say like people have a way of writing, you know, so when you're writing, you could come across through there. But again, just always keep in mind it's professional. You don't want to use slang. You don't want to, you know, maybe use, even people will sometimes use like text language. Let's, you know, just making sure that it's still a professional document, I think is very important. So it is tough to balance that.
One of the things that you might want to think about is, you know, we're constantly telling stories about ourselves, and a cover letter provides an opportunity to share a brief story about yourself and maybe a project that you worked on as a member of a team, the role you took, what the outcome of that was. So kind of, you know, a problem, presenting sort of a problem. Here's the project. The process, the solution, and what your thoughts were about that and how you highlighted that. Because that's where you can say, you know, this was a project that required that I worked 7 days a week, you know, long into the night. I was excited to get up the next morning. I loved working with my teammates. I found myself sometimes in the role of leader, sometimes in the role of problem solver, sometimes just watching what other people were doing in amazement. But it gives you the ability to express who you are, but what you've done as well. And honestly, I've seen that very, very rarely in a cover letter. And I would love to see that, because that's the kind of candidate that I'm looking to grab. Like, oh, they know what they've done. They know how they've done it. They're a leader and a follower, which is hugely, hugely important in an organization.
Yes, and I think I wanted to also just add, KP mentioned earlier about those skills, like the positive, your attitude, and you can't necessarily talk or give an example of that in your resume as well as you could in a cover letter. So I wanted to just highlight that as a great place to say, you know, I approached challenges, you know, by having a positive outlook or those kind of things. But you can't just say that. You need to actually support it with those examples. So yes, that's thank you.
So embrace that cover letter. That's what we're telling you. So much of this comes back to that branding piece, how you market yourself. And I see Jessica has a question about this too. She says, do you have any books that would help us in building better skills to be more marketable or more proactive during this difficult time?
Oh my goodness. I'm like,
Okay,
do you have them?
right here, this is my latest read. You're going to see it backwards probably. It's called Advanced, and it's by a guy by the name of Gary Burnison, B-U-R-N-I-S-O-N. Christine, if you want to put that in the chat, that would be great. This is the ultimate how-to guide for your career. So you know, one of the comments in the chat that Jessica made that I just happened to glance at is believing in constantly learning to prevent from stagnating. Mm-hmm. So my number one talent theme is learner. And so I'm a total geek about it, because even though I am at the latter stages of my career, I am still so interested in learning about this. And this book, let me tell you, it has just set me on fire. I am so excited about things that it suggests and the ways that I can assist students in, you know, moving forward during this really, really challenging time and acquiring a career. So you just made my job easier if you read this book, because it's got a lot of fabulous tips.
That is great. That is great. I don't have all my books with me here at home nowadays, but I do have a series that I really like to recommend beyond the marketing, but it's called Perfect Phrases. I think KP and I have talked about this. They have a series called Perfect Phrases, and then the series is in different things, but there's perfect phrases for cover letters, perfect phrases for resumes. There are different books. You can find them on Amazon. And it's a great series that you can see. It gives you examples. So if you want to highlight this in your cover letter, here's some statements kind of thing. So I think that can also help as well.
Such a good question and such good answers. And I've just been realizing so much. Books are just saving the day lately. They have the answers you seek. Just open them up. So those were such good answers about cover letters, which are so important. But the kind of the sister, the cover letters are resumes, and they are just as important. So I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about resumes. So question for you both. What would you say looks best on a resume? Having a diverse work experience, say maybe working many places, or having worked at one or two places for a long period of time?
You want to go ahead?
Waiting for each other. So what I would say is this, and this is just, I'm really curious as to what Lucy's answer is. I can say this sort of from an HR perspective, is that when I see a candidate who's jumped around a lot, my first question is going to be, how long are they going to be with us? And one of the things that I think that candidates need to recognize is that from an employer's perspective, it is very time consuming and very costly for us to advertise for a job, recruit applicants, screen applicants, conduct interviews, make a hiring offer, bring you in, train you, only to have you leave 6 months later. So we are not likely to take that risk with a candidate who has moved around a lot. So conversely, I don't want to see a candidate who has been in the same organization working the same job for 35 years, because that is going to tell me that they are going to be somebody who is probably pretty set in their ways, may have a lot of knowledge that pertains to the company they worked for, but not necessarily be open-minded about the company that they're going to come to work for. So look at the job and how long the position really requires that you stay in it, I think is really important, because the job has a lifespan unless you are the candidate that can expand the lifespan of that particular position by enhancing the value and the responsibilities that it has to the company. So very important to keep in mind. Lucy?
Yes, no, that was great. And I think that's why I kind of looked at you, because I know you have that experience within the HR world. But I wanted to say that for me, I think also oftentimes we see students graduating, right? And employers will see that lens as a student, right? So as you're a student, you may have gotten internships, you may have gotten you know, a variety of experiences. Maybe you're working part-time jobs while you're going to school. So it's common to see at that stage in your experience, kind of that moving around. Maybe I was working somewhere close to home, but now I'm working on campus. So there is that movement between positions that I think is not hurtful at this point in your career. I think as you move forward, and I know oftentimes I've heard too, and I don't know, KP, like what your thoughts are, it's if I've seen movement every month or every, you know, like I was only there for a month and there's no explanation to, it was a temporary position. You know, if you put seasonal, maybe I had a seasonal job for Christmas or holiday break, right? And maybe it's seasonal. And then I went to my internship for the spring. And now I've graduated, now I need a job. So there, as long as it is able to tell me the story and I'm able to see, I think that's usually helpful as well. I don't expect to see students having a 5-year work experience. Sometimes people do. They find something, they love it. I have students who work with me freshman year through senior year. They have 4 years of the same thing. But meanwhile, they're doing internships maybe also that is related. So they do like to see that you've gotten a good amount of experience, you know, maybe in positions that are relatable. I think that's usually how you bring your transferable skills to the position, I think is what's valuable as well. So I don't know.
Lucy makes a really, really good point, and I just want to add one more thing to that. I think that again is where you could use your cover letter. Because if you have been in positions where this is a seasonal position, I was only hired for 3 months, or I stayed in this position for 6 months, but then I had to leave for an internship, to be able to explain that and say, I have used the time that I have been in college to try to work a variety of different positions to see what I like and what I would be good at. And now I have a better understanding of that, and I'm excited to get into my first career position and really dig in, you know, for the next couple or 3 years, whatever it happens to be. So I think that's really important to emphasize. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you.
Those are great points that you've made there. So since we're on the topic of resumes, KP, I'm going to kick this question to you first. Would you say that is there such a thing as a resume standard that hiring managers prefer?
Yeah. So what comes probably most to mind are the things not to do. So good grammar, exceptional spelling, clear and to the point, where you articulate not just what you've done, but how you've done it. I think that's really important. I don't need to see every single job that you've ever held necessarily, but I do need to see the jobs that are relevant to the position that you are applying for in our organization. So capitalizing on that and then demonstrating with statistics, I really like to know how many people did you serve? How many phone calls did you get? One of the things that I think that we all often miss the opportunity to do, and I am a 2-time CSUN graduate, But the CSU is the largest public university system in the world. And we are one of 23 campuses, one of the most diverse campuses in the entire CSU. To be able to capitalize on that and share some information, I think we have, what, Lucy, almost 500,000 graduates from our institution. It is a phenomenal honor to be part of this school. And unless you are interviewing with somebody who knows about the CSU system, that may just completely go by the wayside. So sometimes customizing your application in a way that talks about that may not necessarily be a bad thing, because it, although not standard, it provides a little more information and knowledge without it being, you know, massively, like, you can't have a resume that's huge, you know, multiple pages, unless you've got multiple years of experience, because most recruiters are going to frankly spend maybe 10 seconds looking at it. I kid you not, literally 10, 15 seconds, particularly in this job market, unless they find something that hooks them really immediately, and then they're more likely to read on.
Lucy, did you want to add anything to that?
You know what? I think that was perfect. I did want to add something that I feel like is important to keep in mind, that I know tailoring, I think, is something that you want to make sure. I know KP mentioned, you know, the positions that are related, to highlight those. I love that you mentioned the quality and the quantities of descriptions. Oftentimes people think, oh, you know what I mean, that I taught a class. Well, did you teach, like, what grade level, or who did you teach, or how many did you teach? So details, I think, for me, is so important when you're looking at your resume, really quantifying and qualifying those things. So just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you both. So resumes are so important. Would you say that your degree major, does that play a factor in the hiring decision when, say, a hiring manager is looking at a resume?
I know in my experience, I go to, like, civil engineers, you know, like civil engineers, you need to have a BA in civil engineering, you know, like very technical careers like that, you would. And, you know, that, again, if it's one of the must-have requirements. Otherwise, I like to say, and I know we have undergrads and graduates here today, I like to say oftentimes there's a plethora of jobs out there that you just need to have a bachelor's. So if I'm looking to hire someone, I'm looking for someone at that degree level. That's what I want. I just want a bachelor's. So the actual major may not. So looking at those descriptions and seeing, so oftentimes they'll say relatable too. They might say looking for someone with maybe English major or relatable major, or maybe psychology and relatable. Psychology, it could be sociology, it could be child development, again, depending on what it is. So keeping in mind, you know, looking at that closely, but knowing that there is some room to work. I know for my master's students, I see a few of my students here today. And so I know for that, it's less wiggle, you know, less room to wiggle around with. So that's what I have.
I would actually agree with that as well. I do think, like Lucy said, there are some professions that you just have to have the applicable degree in order to even qualify for that. But I think the other takeaway is, depending on what your major was, you acquired certain skills from that. So my undergraduate degree is in English, and I learned from that how to be analytical, how to, you know, kind of look at the message beneath the message in order to extract information. I learned how to write well and how to string words together in a way that made the most sense, when to tell a story, when not to tell a story. So those skills, people often say, well, how does that really apply? And, you know, yeah, I write handbooks and I write, you know, letters to employees, but I think it applies in much, much bigger ways in terms of how it trained my brain to be able to function in the role that I have. So again, that's just a reflective process of you looking back and saying, what did I learn from this? Not just the technical skills, but what did I really learn? How am I different from having majored in this particular discipline?
Good stuff. We have a few follow-up questions here. Lonnie is talking about or just really highlighting the importance of having a portfolio. Can we talk about why those are important too when it comes to, really leveraging your experience moving from student to professional? Or if you all have any insight on that.
Sure. I know oftentimes you can add a portfolio as part of your application package. So if you have one of those, so that might be something that you can include. It's kind of like that additional piece, like the cover letter. I know I've seen them here and there. That's also same thing with some majors. You might have your work onto digital, if it's not a portfolio, but some way of showing your work. It's nice because you're saying I'm amazing at creating these things, but then you also include your work. It's sometimes nice to see as well. So I'd say it's helpful for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I think that anything that you can do to sort of enhance a recruiter's understanding of you without going overboard and recognizing the time that they're going to have to spend, particularly in the market, is going to be important for you. So being strategic.
I know we are running a little short on time, so I want to get to some of these a couple more of our questions as they pertain to the interview. So say you got the call, you're being called in for an interview, well, being called at home for a virtual interview maybe now. So one of the big questions is, what are some things you can do to prepare for an interview?
Do you want to start, Lucy?
Well, I always, say practice, practice, practice. You don't want to go into an interview having not prepared in some sense, right? And so what could that look like? Well, there's a lot of places where they put the most common questions. Recently with COVID, I've actually been seeing more and more stuff come out about maybe how the questions are even changing. So doing some research of what could those questions look like so that you can practice answering some of those questions. I know KP mentioned like writing questions and practicing those as well. It's so important to kind of have an opportunity to organize yourself so that when you're answering the questions, you might not draw a blank and not know what to answer. You might not get the opportunity to highlight those things that you really want to highlight if you don't have a chance to practice. So practicing really allows for you to prepare in that sense. I know in pre-COVID time, we would say, prepare about getting to the place and all these things. So preparation looks a little different. I would say technology is a big piece of preparing for an interview, right? We're doing probably a lot more Skype. Make sure you're in a place that you can be connected because you don't want to drop that connection, So I feel like there's so many things and research also, researching the company that you're going to be interviewing with so that, if they have a message or they have things that they're known for, you want to be aware of what you're going to be talking to them about. Because if you're there and you're like, I'm all about this, and they're like, well, that's not who we are, So kind of knowing that you are familiar with who they are, I think is also important. And so,
I think, I think definitely, as Lucy said, making a list of, just Googling top interview questions, I think is really important. You can be pretty assured that you are going to be asked in some manner what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and to tell the company, tell whoever it is you're interviewing with something about yourself. And that's usually the first question. So, think about what you want to say about you professionally. Sometimes people go into these long stories about personally, but that's not what they're looking for. Who are you as a professional? So focus on that. I think when it comes to talking about your strengths, again, that's where you want to look at the job posting, and you want to focus your strengths on matching what it is they are looking for in the position that they're seeking to hire. So what strengths do you have that will be a testimony to that? And then I think that when you talk about your weaknesses, it's really important to think about how you want to frame that. So you want to frame something in terms of, here's my strength, here's the shadow side of that strength, the weakness associated with this, and then this is what I have done to correct it, right? So it's sort of this sandwich approach where you have strength, weakness, and then the correction. I don't think you can go wrong when you do that, and make it something substantive. You know, I tend to take on too much work and then I become overwhelmed. So what I've had to do at the end of every day is reevaluate what I'm working on, reprioritize, and then go in the next day with kind of an updated plan of action. That's an example of how you might sandwich that weakness. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Okay.
Another just quick follow-up question about interviews. I know one of the things I've struggled with interviews is I get really nervous before them. They're very nerve-wracking. You're on the spot. Do you have any tips for how to remain calm before and during an interview? Whoever wants to go first.
Amy, do you want to go first?
So two tips, I think. Number one, we've all heard of sort of the superhero pose, and I think that there is measurable data that indicates that if you assume that position, the position of a superhero, and you hold it for 2 minutes, it will calm you down before you go into an interview. So, you know, kind of standing up, holding yourself firm, feeling kind of the strength for you. I think there is benefit to that. I think what worked most particularly for me when I go into any situation that's nerve-wracking, including interviews, because sometimes I'm nervous when I'm interviewing candidates, is to think about how you are going to provide service. How do you provide service? So instead of your mental focus being on you, extend that mental focus out into a service role. And how are you going to contribute? How do you add value? How do you make it about somebody else? I think that shift is significant in being able to allay nerves.
Yes, I would just add, that's great, all of that. I was just going to add, breathe. And sometimes we just need to take that deep breath. And in addition to that, I like how you said sometimes you're nervous, KP, and I think often keeping in mind that you're being interviewed, but you're also interviewing them. So oftentimes, yes, a lot of times the interviewer, you know, is often nervous too. Like, who are we meeting? Like, am I going to, you know, make a good impression too? Because if you're a good candidate, I want you to work for me too. So it's a two-sided. And so keep that in mind that, you know, I always appreciate when interviewers tell interviewees, like, it's okay, like, we get that you're nervous, you know, so like, you know, acknowledging that it is a nerve-wracking situation. I also like to just add, if you're going into an interview and you're not nervous, then it's when I say we have to talk, because I think it's very, very reasonable to be nervous, because you know, you want to get the jobs, you know, what is it that they're going to ask me? So a lot of that unknown. So if you prep for it, you know, and kind of practice, I think oftentimes that can help as well.
So good. And just want to quickly add that self-compassion is so key too. You're going to do an interview, and interviews can be really challenging, and everyone gets a little bit nervous. So it's like, how do you check in and kind of give yourself the permission to be a little bit nervous? But it's okay. It's part of the process. It means you care. So good responses there. Moving on to just another quick question, since we're on the interview side of things. Something that always happens in an interview is you're asked to provide any questions that you may have, usually at the end of the interview. What are some questions you should probably never ask during an interview? KP, I want to kick this one to you first.
Don't ask about salary. Don't ask about benefits. You haven't gotten the job yet. So it's premature to ask about both of those things. I think that asking for any special accommodations. I know that somebody did an interview with a candidate once who, and this is obviously pre-COVID, but who came in, interviewed, and then asked if they might be able to telecommute. That was not an appropriate time to ask that question because we hadn't even decided that we were going to hire that candidate at that point. So, you know, hold off on questions like that until you are actually in a position where you've got a job and offer in front of you and you're trying to start engaging in the negotiation process.
And I think I just want to quickly add 2 things to that. One is always have questions prepared. I feel like that just shows that you're interested in having a question, but never ask, this is my big, like almost my pet peeve, never ask a question that is obvious. And what I mean by that is that they just told you, they'll let you know, maybe in the introduction, and I know we get nervous, so sometimes we might miss it, but pay attention, because maybe in their introduction they said, okay, this is your interview, you'll be interviewed next week if you get the next step, and then we'll let people know. You know, sometimes they do an introduction, right? And then at the end you're like, when will I know? And it's like, oh, didn't we tell them? Like, are they not paying attention? Like, what's going on? So please, please, please make sure that, I always recommend, and I don't know, KP might have something else, but I always recommend with questions to come in with, think of 5 questions ahead of time. You're not going to most likely get through 5 questions at the end of an interview, but I like to say come with your 5 questions, because maybe 2 of those, they give you the answers during your interview. And then you're like, oh no, now I have to think of a new question. So 5 questions or more, but come in, be prepared, and pay attention. And at the end, really what's important to you to know, and that is appropriate. And when you ask those questions, so good luck with that.
I think that's true. I think also it depends on the job. I think that you should come prepared. I think if you had 5 questions, that would be interesting. I rarely see that. I think the norm is probably 2 to 3 questions, but well thought out questions, like Lucy said, not obvious questions, but questions that are geared toward how you are going to be expected to add value. So, for example, in my first 30 days of employment, what are going to be the expectations of me? And you're going to want to be able to, you know, that's a good, there's some strategies. You may want to take notes of that, so that when they tell you, you're not just having to remember, you're jotting something down so that they see that you really care. What are some of the challenges that others in this position may have faced? That is a question that incites awareness, that you want to be able to overcome that and demonstrate to them, if you are hired, that you can combat that almost immediately, because you can be sure that they're going to be looking for that. So, you know, thoughtful, reflective questions, and there's just tons of information on the internet about good questions to ask that aren't, not intended to trick the interviewer, but more to gather more information for you, as you know, and for them, in terms of, this is really a thoughtful candidate who's going to ask good questions and who's going to be self-aware.
Good stuff. Thank you both. We have another quick follow-up question. Angel's asking, what would you recommend for those who are concerned with having good internet connection or privacy to have a confident interview? I might chime in on this one, if you all don't mind, a bit. I know I was just having some connection issues, so it was calling my internet provider and just seeing if I can get my service upgraded. It turned out it was free. So see about that, but also contact your phone company. Oftentimes cell phones can provide their own hotspot. I know several providers are allowing that for free right now during the COVID crisis. And with regard to privacy, it's all about communicating who you're with. Sometimes you have to set up a schedule in your house because we're all at home. So you might just need to say, I've got an interview from 2 to 4 during this time. May I have the living room? And may I be the only one on the internet during this time? Because oftentimes when we're sharing the internet, we're taking our usage availability from each other. So you can just communicate and say, I need the internet and the living room from this time to this time. Would that be okay? Is there anything you wanted to add to that, either of you?
I think that's awesome.
Great.
So I know we've got just several minutes left, and I want to get to a couple more questions about what to do after the interview. So first question is it preferred if an applicant follows up with the status of their application? When is it too early or too late to follow up on applications?
So what I would say, first and foremost, is after the interview, send a thank you note. I think that that's really important. And I don't care that it's handwritten. I care that you have taken the time to reflect on the interview, maybe suggest an article, talk about an article that you read that pertained to the organization and the company and how excited you are to work for that place. Again, kind of reiterate some information about your qualifications for the position. And then I give it a good 2 weeks. And the reason that I say before you do any kind of follow-up, I mean, one of the questions that you certainly can ask at the end of an interview is, do you have any idea of when I might hear from you next? Or I might get some sort of follow-up. Or you can ask the HR person if that's appropriate. But, you know, when we do interviews, we work for a bureaucratic organization. We have a process that we have to go through. So depending on where you are applying to work, they may have the same sort of thing. And it takes a minute for them to get through all of that and make, you know, some decisions about what they're going to do and then follow up with you. I would say in the COVID environment, it's going to take longer. It's just going to, because we are going to be bombarded with applications for every single job that we have. So it just is going to take longer.
I was just going to add that it's important to do it in an appropriate way. So if you contact, yes, thank you notes are great, and follow up, knowing who to follow up with, but not this like, it's been 1 day, can I tell me the decision now? It's been a week, and then like 2 days later. I've seen it all. I've seen it where I've had people who are calling 3-4 times a day. And so that's a little excessive, I know. And it's like, we know you need jobs. And especially I think when it's even more pressing during this time, that we can, as applicants, could feel like, I need to know, you know, I was told it would be by Friday and it's Friday evening. Why do I not know yet if I got it or not? So, you know, being understanding that, you know, they're going through the process and everyone's being impacted by different things. So I think that's just something to keep in mind, showing interest, but not like excessively. Keeping that in mind, I think, is important.
And I think that's Lucy raises a really good point. So there's so much psychology that's involved in working in HR. So when you see somebody who is calling all the time, or is calling a little bit prematurely, or is not necessarily phrasing their question appropriately, I realize that you may not have had an opportunity to get through everybody. I'm getting ready to go out of town for a couple of days. I don't want to take a chance that I might miss, you know, a contact in some way because I'm not going to have access to the internet, whatever it may be. But I think when you appear too anxious, I know for me, I start getting worried about our choice. If there is anything that happens in that space between we finished an interview, we've selected a candidate, and we're getting ready to make a job offer and they've accepted. So there's stuff that happens in the negotiation process that might not work out so well, but that piece about being patient also tells me something about the candidate. This is going to be somebody that's going to be hard to work with because I've got a really busy schedule and I may not be able to answer their questions in a couple of days, and they are not going to have a high tolerance for that. So that's just something sort of to keep in mind from a different perspective.
All right, one final question for you, you both, and KP, this might be one I throw to you first. Do you have any tips regarding salary negotiation? Any quick tips you want to share with our folks?
I think that my quick tips have changed a lot since March. I think right now we are going into a job market where people are lucky to get jobs and they are lucky to have jobs. So whereas in the past, I would have really encouraged people, if they felt like they had the qualifications, to negotiate more heavily, I would now say that it's probably better to tread a little lightly where that's concerned. Find out more about the job, how you can add value, get your foot in the door, and then know that as the economy starts to recover, if you are there, you may be in a better position at that point to try to renegotiate your salary or ask for an increase in pay.
Lucy, anything you wanted to add to that?
Not necessarily on negotiation. I think that was perfect. I think that balance is different now, and I think that was great.
Perfect. Well, we have reached the end of our workshop. I hope that was really helpful to everyone who was here today. Lucy and KP, is there anything you wanted to add just as closing thoughts to our folks in attendance?
I think I just wanted to highlight something real quickly. I know we kind of maybe touched upon this, but being open, I know in the video, and just to go back to that, they mentioned that you might have had a plan, like plan A, like I'm going to graduate and I'm going to look for this and I'm going to do this. And that still could be your goals, but they might just, the path there might look a little differently right now. So I think always taking care of yourself and maybe your immediate needs, you know, you have bills to pay and stuff. It's okay to get that part-time job or to get that temporary job right now. So taking care of yourself in that sense, and see how you can move towards those goals, not to change your goals completely, but it might just take a little different path there. So I think I want to say that, and feel free to reach out to me at the Career Center anytime.
I read something this morning that I thought was so applicable to this presentation. And what it says is that there are 3 primary drivers of results in your life. One of those is luck. The second one is strategy. And the third is actions. And 2 out of the 3 are under your control, but if you manage those well, you have the ability to influence luck differently. And so I think that this is a time to really think about your strategy and your actions and be as proactive as you possibly can, while also being patient and understanding where we are is where we are. So look around for opportunities that you think are going to work for you, and stay hopeful. I think that's really, really important in this difficult time. And I, like Lucy, agree. Feel free to reach out if there's anything that I can do to provide assistance as well. I really appreciate you all being on the call this morning.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you all so much for attending. Also, we just want to let you know that we've recorded this Zoom call and it will be available on the Career Center website soon. And I'll also send it out in an email to our graduates so you all have that available to you as well. Thank you all so much for coming. We hope this was helpful. we got your back. We know we're in an unsure time, but this is all going to get figured out, and you're all going to get great jobs soon. I know this. So
I'm going to say, I want to hear what you all end up at. Keep us posted as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And with that, I think we are all done here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.